Hello guys, welcome to MJ Real Stories channel, and today we are going to talk about one of the most emotional, lesser known, and deeply human stories connected to the King of Pop. A story that does not begin on a stage, does not involve awards, and does not include flashing cameras, but instead takes place quietly inside the walls of a children's hospital, where hope is often fragile, and every small act of kindness can mean the difference between despair and strength. This is the story of the final gift Michael Jackson sent to a children's hospital, a gift that perfectly reflected who he truly was when the world was not watching. Michael Jackson's relationship with children was never a secret. From the earliest days of his fame, he showed a natural ability to connect with them, not as a superstar speaking down to fans, but as someone who genuinely understood their innocence, fears, and dreams. Long before the controversies, long before the headlines tried to define him, Michael was visiting hospitals, orphanages, and care centers around the world. He didn't always announce these visits. In many cases, the only people who knew were the doctors, nurses, and children whose lives were briefly filled with joy by his presence. He believed that children carried the purest form of truth in the world, and that when a child suffers, something deeply wrong has happened in society. As the years went on and the pressures of fame, legal battles, and financial stress began to weigh heavily on him, Michael never abandoned this part of himself. Even when he was physically exhausted, emotionally drained, and under constant scrutiny, he continued to give. What many people do not realize is that in the final year of his life, while preparing for what would become the legendary but unfinished This Is It comeback, Michael was also thinking about children who were fighting battles far more serious than stage fright or critical reviews. He was thinking about children fighting for their lives. In early 2009, Michael became aware of a children's hospital that was struggling. The hospital treated some of the most critically ill children, including those with advanced cancer, severe heart conditions, and rare genetic disorders. Funding shortages meant outdated equipment, limited pain management resources, and overcrowded family areas where parents often slept in chairs or hallways just to remain close to their children. When Michael learned about this situation, it deeply affected him. According to people close to him at the time, he was unusually quiet after hearing the details. He reportedly said that no child should have to suffer more simply because of money. What makes this story extraordinary is how Michael chose to respond. He did not call a press conference. He did not ask for his name to be attached to a wing or a plaque. Instead, he instructed his team to arrange a significant financial gift to be sent discreetly to the hospital. The donation was substantial enough to immediately change the hospital's situation. It was earmarked for new pediatric medical equipment, advanced pain management programs, and the creation of a proper family support space where parents could stay overnight with dignity. Along with the donation came something even more powerful, a personal handwritten message from Michael Jackson himself. It was not written as a celebrity addressing fans. It was written as one human being speaking to others who were suffering. In the letter, Michael expressed his love for the children, his belief in their strength, and his hope that they would feel comforted even during the hardest moments. He thanked the doctors and nurses for their dedication and reminded them that their work mattered deeply. He signed the letter simply, without titles or grand language. Hospital administrators were instructed clearly that Michael did not want publicity. His name was not to be released. There were no photos, no interviews, and no announcements. For weeks, only a handful of staff members knew the true source of the donation. To the outside world, it was just an anonymous act of generosity. But inside the hospital, the impact was immediate and profound. New equipment arrived that allowed doctors to provide better care without delays. Children who previously had to endure more pain during procedures now had access to improved pain management options. Parents who had been sleeping uncomfortably for weeks were given a safe, quiet space to rest near their children. Nurses later said the atmosphere in the hospital changed. There was a renewed sense of hope, not just because of the resources, but because someone out there cared enough to help without expecting anything in return. One particularly moving story, shared later by a nurse, involved a young child whose condition suddenly worsened late one night. The hospital was able to use newly acquired equipment funded by the donation to stabilize the child immediately. The nurse said that without those resources, the outcome might have been very different. At the time, no one in that room knew that the help they were receiving came from one of the most famous people on the planet. They only knew that someone, somewhere, had chosen kindness. Michael Jackson passed away on June 25, 2009, just months after sending that gift. When the news broke, the world reacted with shock, grief, and disbelief. Fans gathered outside hospitals, studios, and landmarks. Music played endlessly. Tributes poured in from every corner of the globe. Inside the children's hospital, the reaction was quieter but no less emotional. When staff members learned that the anonymous donor they had been thanking privately was Michael Jackson, many of them were overwhelmed. The hospital held a small, private moment of remembrance. There was no media, no fans, no cameras. Staff members stood together, some in tears, remembering the children whose lives had been touched by his final act of generosity. Michael's handwritten message was framed and placed in a discreet area near the pediatric wing, not as a monument to fame, but as a reminder of compassion. For the doctors and nurses, Michael Jackson was no longer just a global icon. He was someone who had stood with them in their mission to heal. In the years that followed, stories slowly began to surface. Former staff members spoke about how that donation continued to help children long after Michael was gone. Parents shared memories of finding comfort in the family support room during the darkest days of their lives. Some children who recovered would later learn that part of the care they received had been made possible by someone they knew only as a singer. For them, Michael Jackson became associated not just with music, but with survival. This final gift tells us something important about Michael Jackson that often gets lost in debates, documentaries, and sensational headlines. It shows us a man who, even in his most difficult moments, chose empathy over attention, love over recognition, and action over words. He once said that the greatest education in the world is watching children at play. Perhaps the greatest lesson he left behind was showing how to care for them when they are most vulnerable. Michael Jackson's life was complex, filled with extraordinary highs and painful lows. But this story cuts through all of that. It reminds us that behind the glittering gloves and iconic dance moves was a human being who never stopped believing that the world could be better if we protected its most innocent members. His final gift was not a song, not a performance, and not a record-breaking achievement. It was hope, delivered quietly to those who needed it most. And maybe that is why this story matters so much. Because in a world obsessed with fame, Michael Jackson chose to disappear into the background so that children could have a better chance at life. That choice, more than anything else, reveals the true legacy of the King of Pop. Thanks for watching.